The hardest part about divorce isn't losing a marriage. It's watching your child wonder if love was ever real. Ethan Walker heard those words in his head while sitting in a tiny plastic chair inside Willow Creek Elementary, his broad shoulders looking out of place among finger paintings and paper stars taped to the classroom walls. Across from him, the teacher spoke softly, careful with every word. "Lily's doing her best," she said. "She smiles. She helps everyone. But lately she keeps drawing houses with one window dark." Ethan lowered his eyes. His wedding band was gone now. The pale line around his finger remained, quiet as a ghost. "Daddy." Lily's small voice drifted from beside him. He turned immediately. "Yes, sweetheart." She looked down at her sneakers, pink laces tied unevenly. "People can break promises?" The room went still. Not loud still. The kind of stillness that lives between heartbeats. Ethan forced a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sometimes people break promises," he said gently. "But good people keep trying anyway." Lily nodded slowly. She accepted that answer because children often accept pain long before adults do. Outside, late October wind pushed golden leaves across the school parking lot. Ethan opened the passenger door of his aging silver Ford F-150 and helped Lily climb inside. Her backpack looked almost bigger than she was. He buckled her in, brushed a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear, and handed her the peanut butter crackers he kept in the glove compartment. "Dinner of champions?" she asked with a tiny grin. "Temporary dinner of champions," he corrected. "Real dinner comes after Daddy survives work." She giggled. That sound saved him more times than she would ever know. 37 minutes later, Ethan stepped into Hayes Urban Development carrying a lunch cooler, a weathered leather notebook, and the invisible weight of becoming both parents overnight. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and glass walls that reflected success from every angle. Men in tailored jackets moved quickly. Women balanced coffee cups and tablets. Nobody noticed the single dad with tired eyes crossing toward the service elevator. Ethan preferred it that way. Quiet had become his armor. In the break room, he opened his lunch. Turkey sandwich. Apple slices. Same as yesterday. Same as most days. He checked his phone. One message from the daycare reminder app. One photo from Lily. A drawing. Two stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. The words read, "Me and Daddy forever." Ethan swallowed hard. Then footsteps entered behind him. Slow. Measured. Confident. Charlotte Hayes stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal coat over a cream blouse. Autumn light catching the edges of her chestnut hair. CEO. 35. Brilliant. Untouchable. She had come for coffee. Instead, she stopped. Her eyes drifted toward the photograph on Ethan's phone. Then lower. To his left hand. To the missing ring. Ethan locked the screen quietly. Charlotte said nothing. Neither did he. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Coffee steamed between them. And for reasons neither understood yet, the silence stayed. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale autumn light, and the smell of cinnamon oatmeal drifting through Ethan Walker's small kitchen. The house was quiet except for the soft scratch of crayons moving across paper. Lily sat at the table in mismatched socks, tongue peeking out in concentration while she colored another picture. Ethan stood by the stove flipping pancakes, shaped badly enough to be called abstract art. "Is that supposed to be a bear?" Lily asked without looking up. Ethan squinted at the pan. "That is clearly a pancake with emotional depth." Lily laughed. "It looks like a potato." "A heroic potato," Ethan corrected. She laughed again, louder this time, and for a brief moment the heaviness inside the house stepped outside and waited on the porch. After breakfast he helped her with her coat, zipped it all the way up, and kissed the top of her head before school. "You have lunch?" he asked. "Yes." "Homework folder?" "Yes." "Emergency dinosaur sticker?" She held it up proudly. "Always." Ethan smiled and watched her disappear into the school entrance before driving toward work. Hayes Urban Development looked different in the early morning. The glass tower caught the sunrise and turned gold along the edges. Beautiful from far away, exhausting from inside. Ethan entered through the side door with his lunch cooler in one hand and blueprints tucked under his arm. He was not an executive. Not anymore. Once he had sketched entire neighborhoods and dreamed in measurements and light angles. Now he handled facility support, maintenance coordination, anything quiet enough to keep life steady. Quiet paid bills. Quiet kept Lily safe. In the employee lounge, he opened his container. Turkey sandwich again. Apple slices again. Coffee that had already lost the battle against time. Across the room, people talked about ski trips, promotions, holiday homes in Colorado. Ethan listened without listening. His world fit inside a second-grade classroom, a pickup truck, and a little girl who still believed pancakes could be heroes. "You always eat the same thing?" a voice asked suddenly. Ethan looked up. Charlotte Hayes stood near the coffee machine, holding a ceramic mug the color of rain clouds. No assistant. No entourage. Just her. "Mostly," Ethan answered. "Efficient." She glanced at the lunchbox. Turkey sandwich 3 days in a row seems less like efficiency and more like punishment. Ethan almost smiled. "I save the exciting meals for birthdays and financial miracles." Something shifted in her expression. Not amusement exactly. Curiosity. She noticed the small pink napkin folded beside his lunch. A child had written on it in uneven marker. "Good luck, Daddy." There was a tiny sun with crooked rays beneath the words. Charlotte looked at it longer than expected. "Your daughter?" she asked quietly. "Lily." His voice softened immediately when he said her name. 8 years old. Charlotte nodded once. "She draws sons." Ethan looked down at the napkin. "She thinks every lunch needs one." Silence settled again. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. Coffee steamed between them. Outside the window, leaves drifted across the plaza like scattered gold. Charlotte adjusted her sleeve and turned toward the door. Then she stopped. "Mr. Walker." Ethan looked up. "Keep the napkin." He frowned slightly. "I was not planning to throw it away." Her eyes lowered for half a second. "Good," she said. Softly. Some things deserve to stay. And for reasons she could not explain, she carried that little drawing with her all morning. Rain arrived just after 3 in the afternoon, soft at first, then steady enough to paint silver lines across the windows of Hayes' urban development. Ethan Walker was reviewing maintenance requests when his phone vibrated. Willow Creek Elementary. His stomach tightened before he even answered. "Mr. Walker?" the school secretary said gently. "Lily is fine, but after-school activities were canceled because of the weather and the buses are running late. We still have a few children here." Ethan checked the clock. 4:40. His last report was due by 6. He closed the file immediately. "I am on my way." 30 minutes later, he stepped through the school doors with rain still clinging to his jacket. Lily sat near the office hugging her backpack. The moment she saw him, her face lit up. "Daddy." He crouched and opened his arms. She ran straight into them. "Sorry I am late." "You came," she whispered as if that alone mattered. It always would. On the drive back, Lily leaned against the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. "Do you have to go back to work?" she asked quietly. Ethan hesitated. "Just for a little while." She nodded, trying to be brave in the way children do when they think love means making things easier. "Can I come?" Ethan looked at her through the rearview mirror. "Only if you promise not to become the new chief executive officer." No promises. The office was nearly empty by the time they arrived. Evening lights glowed warm against polished floors. Most employees had already gone home. Ethan settled Lily inside a conference room with coloring books, crackers, and a blanket he kept in the truck for emergencies. 15 minutes, he said. Maybe 20. "I will survive," she declared dramatically. Ethan smiled and returned to finish his work. 40 minutes later, silence spread through the building. Too much silence. He looked toward the conference room. Empty. His heart stumbled. Lily. No answer. He checked the hallway, the lounge, the lobby. Then he noticed a thin strip of light beneath the executive office door. Ethan pushed it open carefully. Lily was asleep on the long sofa beneath the windows, curled around a folded cream cardigan draped over her shoulders. Beside her sat Charlotte Hayes. Not working, not typing, just sitting quietly with a file closed in her lap. The city lights behind her turned the glass into mirrors. She looked up immediately. "She was drawing," Charlotte said softly. Then she fell asleep. Ethan stepped closer. On the coffee table lay a picture made with colored pencils. 3 stick figures stood beneath a crooked yellow sun. One tall, one small, one woman with long brown hair. Ethan froze. Charlotte noticed it too. Neither spoke. Rain tapped gently against the windows 40 stories above the street. Lily shifted in her sleep and tightened her hold on the cardigan. Charlotte looked down at her. Her voice became quieter than the rain. She asked if offices ever get lonely at night. Ethan swallowed. "What did you tell her?" Charlotte kept her eyes on the sleeping child. "I told her sometimes they do. Another silence settled. Different now. Softer. The kind that carries truth without asking permission. Then Lily whispered in her sleep, barely audible. "Miss Sunshine." Charlotte blinked. Ethan frowned slightly. "What?" Lily smiled without waking. Miss Sunshine came. Charlotte lowered her gaze at once. And somewhere inside a room built for contracts and strategy, something gentle took its first breath. The next week moved quietly, the way healing often does when nobody is watching. Mornings belonged to pancakes that still looked like heroic potatoes, school drop-offs, and Lily singing half-remembered songs in Ethan Walker's truck. Evenings belonged to homework at the kitchen table, folded laundry, and bills arranged in careful stacks beneath the refrigerator light. Ethan never complained. He had learned that dignity sometimes looked like reheated soup and staying awake 10 extra minutes to pack tomorrow's lunch. At Hayes, urban development autumn settled over the city. Wind carried leaves across the plaza outside, while the glass tower reflected skies the color of steel. Ethan spent most of his days in maintenance. Coordination, walking quiet hallways, and solving problems nobody noticed unless they went wrong. But lately something else had changed. Every few days he would find small things waiting. A new box of crayons in Lily's emergency drawer at the office. Extra fruit cups appearing in the employee refrigerator. Once, a children's blanket folded neatly in the conference room where Lily had fallen asleep. No note. No name. Just kindness. Ethan assumed the office manager was being thoughtful. He thanked her twice. She looked confused both times. On the 42nd floor, Charlotte Hayes stood beside her office window, watching rain gather along the glass. Her assistant had left an hour earlier. The city below glowed gold and white beneath the early evening haze. On her desk sat something she should have thrown away days ago. Lily's drawing. 3 stick figures beneath a crooked sun. Miss Sunshine had become the woman with brown hair. Charlotte traced the corner of the paper once and immediately pulled her hand back as if kindness could become dangerous when held too long. Her eyes drifted toward the cabinet against the far wall. Locked. Unopened for years. She crossed the room slowly and entered the code. Inside hung a garment bag covered in clear plastic. White silk. Soft lace. A wedding dress that never reached a wedding. For years earlier, she had stood inside another room, wearing hope like it was permanent. 3 weeks before the ceremony, the man she trusted had walked away. No shouting. No scandal. Just absence. Since then, Charlotte had built buildings, signed contracts, expanded offices, won awards. People called her powerful. They never called her lonely because powerful women were not supposed to look lonely. She closed the cabinet gently. A knock interrupted the silence. "Come in." Ethan stepped inside holding a project folder. He stopped when he noticed her standing near the open cabinet door. Charlotte moved in front of it immediately. Too late. He had already seen the edge of white fabric. Neither spoke. The office suddenly felt smaller. "I can come back," Ethan said softly. No, her voice came too quickly. She lowered it. "It is fine." He placed the folder on her desk. Maintenance schedule for the North Wing. Charlotte nodded without looking at it. Ethan hesitated. "You know," he said quietly, "Lily thinks brave people are the ones who smile when they are sad." Charlotte finally looked at him. "And what do you think?" Ethan's expression softened. "I think brave people are the ones who keep loving after disappointment." The room went still. Outside the windows, the city lights flickered awake one by one. Charlotte lowered her eyes. For the first time in years, she wanted to ask someone to stay. She did not. Ethan turned toward the door. Then she spoke without planning it. "Mr. Walker." He paused. "How do you keep going?" He looked back. Thought for a moment. "Because my daughter still believes tomorrow can be good." Silence followed. Gentle. Honest. Charlotte glanced toward the hidden dress once more. And somewhere deep inside a heart that had spent years under glass, a crack let in light. Some nights do not announce themselves as important. They arrive quietly with cold coffee, unfinished reports, and a sky the color of wet stone. Friday had been one of those nights. Hayes Urban Development was preparing for the presentation of its largest community project in 3 years. Investors from Chicago were arriving Monday. The design files, environmental models, cost projections, everything lived inside the central server room on the 27th floor. At 6:12 in the evening, the first alarm sounded. Not loud, just a soft electronic tone that most people ignored until the second one came. Then the lights flickered. Conversations stopped. Screens froze. "Server outage," someone whispered. Another voice followed. The project files are gone. Panic moved faster than footsteps. Managers gathered in hallways. Phones lit up. Assistants hurried between offices carrying laptops that suddenly felt useless. Inside the executive conference room, Charlotte Hayes stood before a wall screen that had gone black. Her jaw stayed calm. Her eyes did not. "How long until recovery?" she asked. Silence answered first. Then someone said, "Maybe hours." Another said, "Possibly tomorrow." Tomorrow was impossible. The meeting ended. People scattered. One by one, floors emptied. By 8:05, the building felt hollow. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Emergency lights cast pale gold across quiet hallways. Charlotte remained alone in the conference room, staring at the dead monitor. A knock came from the doorway. Ethan Walker stood there carrying a toolbox and a folded maintenance schematic. "You are still here?" she asked. "So are you." He stepped inside. "I checked the lower systems. The outage hit the backup transfer unit." Charlotte blinked. "Information technology already looked." Ethan nodded. "They checked software. I checked the building." 3 quick sentences. Calm. Simple. Certain. He set the toolbox down and disappeared into the service corridor behind the server room. 40 minutes passed. Then 60. Rain deepened outside. Charlotte found herself walking toward the lower maintenance level. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust. She followed the glow of a work light. Ethan sat cross-legged beside an open panel, sleeves rolled up, reading wiring diagrams spread across the floor. "Loose relay connection," he said without looking up. "Backup never switched over." Charlotte stood quietly. "You know systems engineering?" Ethan tightened a component. "A little. A little." He finally looked at her. "Before life changed, I designed infrastructure models." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You were an engineer?" Ethan smiled without pride. "I was a lot of things." Silence settled again. The warm kind. The respectful kind. At 9:21, the lights steadied. Monitors across the building flickered back to life. The server room hummed. Files returned. Data restored. Upstairs, cheers echoed faintly through the empty halls. Ethan simply packed his tools. "You saved the project," Charlotte said quietly. "No," he closed the box. "I fixed a relay." She stared at him. "Why do you always make yourself smaller?" Ethan paused. The question landed deeper than she intended. He lowered his eyes. "Because after enough loss," he said softly, "small feels safer." The room became very still. Rain traced silver lines down the narrow window near the stairwell. Charlotte looked at the man kneeling beside a toolbox under fluorescent lights and suddenly saw something different. Not maintenance staff. Not the quiet employee with a lunchbox and tired eyes. She saw a man carrying an entire world with steady hands. Ethan lifted the toolbox and turned toward the stairs. Behind him, Charlotte remained standing in the soft hum of restored machines. And for the first time, she realized she was no longer watching him because she was curious. She was watching because her heart had already started moving before she gave it permission. Monday arrived with clear skies and the kind of cold sunlight that made the city look sharper than it felt. Hayes Urban Development buzzed before 8 in the morning. Investors had arrived. The restored project files were already moving through presentation rooms. People smiled more than usual. Success had returned. Credit, however, moved in different directions. Ethan Walker carried a supply cart through the north corridor when 2 analysts passed behind him. "Did you hear?" one whispered. The chief executive officer stayed until midnight with him. The other lowered her voice, but not enough. "The maintenance guy? Apparently he saved the project. Or maybe she just likes him." Soft laughter followed. Ethan kept walking. Quiet had taught him many things. One of them was how to survive being talked about without turning around. Upstairs, Charlotte Hayes sat through the investor meeting with perfect posture and flawless answers. Revenue forecasts, community expansion, environmental metrics. She delivered every number exactly right. Still, her attention drifted once toward the glass wall overlooking the lower courtyard. Ethan stood outside beside his truck, helping Lily tie her scarf before school. He knelt in the cold without hesitation. The little girl said something. Ethan laughed. Charlotte forgot the sentence she had been about to speak. "Miss Hayes?" an investor prompted gently. She blinked. "My apologies." The meeting continued. Her thoughts did not. That afternoon, Lily returned to the office for an hour because the school art club ended early. Ethan settled her in the employee lounge with crayons and apple slices. "I have one inspection," he told her. 10 minutes. 15 if you get distracted by heroic potatoes again, she said seriously. Ethan smiled and left. 5 minutes later, Charlotte entered for coffee and stopped immediately. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by drawings. Miss Sunshine, the little girl announced with complete confidence. Charlotte froze. Hello, Lily. I made something. Lily held up a page. 3 stick figures again. This time the woman stood closer. The sun was larger. Charlotte sat slowly beside her. Who are they? Lily pointed. Daddy, then herself, then the third figure. You. Charlotte looked at the paper longer than necessary. Why me? Lily shrugged in the honest way children do. Because Daddy smiles different when you are around. Silence filled the room. Soft, dangerous, gentle all at once. Charlotte lowered the drawing. Your father and I work together. Lily nodded as if that explained nothing. You still make him smile. Before Charlotte could answer, Ethan returned. He stopped at the doorway. Lily was leaning against Charlotte while explaining the artistic importance of crooked sons. Charlotte was listening as though the conversation mattered more than quarterly profits. Ethan stood very still. Am I interrupting? He asked quietly. Lily looked up. No, we are fixing your happiness. Ethan blinked. Charlotte lowered her eyes immediately. Lily. He stepped closer. That is not a job. Maybe it should be, she said softly. The room became still again. Outside, leaves drifted across the plaza in slow circles. Ethan gathered Lily's papers. One slipped free and landed near Charlotte's shoes. She picked it up. On the back, written in large, uneven letters, was a sentence. Families can start again. Charlotte stared at the words. Ethan reached for the page. Their hands brushed for half a second. Nothing dramatic happened. No music. No lightning. Just warmth. Small. Human. Real. Ethan pulled back first. Charlotte held the drawing a moment longer. And somewhere behind office doors and polished glass, rumors continued moving through the building. But for the first time, neither of them seemed to hear them. Saturday arrived with cold sunshine and a sky so clear it looked painted. Ethan Walker had promised Lily one thing all week. Pancakes at Maple Street Diner. Nothing fancy. Red booths. Old country songs on the radio. The kind of place where coffee came fast and everyone called you honey whether they knew your name or not. Lily wore her yellow sweater because she said it matched happiness. Ethan wore the same brown jacket he had owned for years. They sat by the window while steam rose from hot chocolate and the smell of maple syrup filled the room. Daddy. Lily leaned over the table seriously. Do grown-ups get lonely? Ethan paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. Sometimes. Even strong ones. Especially strong ones. Lily thought about that. Outside the window, leaves rolled across the sidewalk like little boats. Inside the diner, warmth settled into every corner. Then Miss Sunshine must be very brave, Lily said quietly. Ethan looked up. Why would you say that? She stirred her whipped cream. Her smile feels sad sometimes. The words landed softly but stayed. Ethan did not answer right away. Because children often saw what adults spent years hiding. Across town, Charlotte Hayes stood inside her apartment kitchen, holding a grocery basket she had no reason to carry. The place was beautiful. High ceilings. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City view. Perfect silence. Too perfect. She opened the refrigerator. Closed it again. Walked to the living room. Then back. On the counter sat Lily's drawing from the office. Families can start again. Charlotte touched the paper once. 10 minutes later, she found herself driving without planning where to go. Fate, kindness, coincidence. Sometimes they all wore the same coat. When she stepped in a Maple Street Diner, the bell above the door chimed softly. Ethan looked up first. Surprise crossed his face. Lily nearly launched out of the booth. Miss Sunshine. Half the diner smiled immediately. Charlotte laughed before she could stop herself. A real laugh. Bright. Unprotected. Ethan had never heard it before. May I join you? She asked carefully. Only if you like pancakes shaped like historical mistakes, Ethan replied. Charlotte sat down. Lily pushed the extra syrup toward her as if welcoming family was the most natural thing in the world. Conversation came easier than anyone expected. School stories. Terrible pancake art. Lily explaining why dinosaurs probably needed sweaters in winter. Charlotte listened. Ethan watched. At one point, Lily excused herself to look at the pie display near the counter. Silence settled between the adults. Gentle, not empty. Charlotte looked out the window. I used to come places alone all the time, she said quietly. I thought independence meant not needing anyone. Ethan rested his hands around his coffee mug. And now? She smiled faintly. Now I think maybe people are not meant to carry everything by themselves. Ethan looked toward Lily. She was debating pie flavors with complete seriousness. You know, he said softly. After the divorce, I stopped believing life could surprise me in good ways. Charlotte turned toward him. He continued without looking up. Then Lily kept showing up every morning like hope had never been broken. The diner grew quieter around them. Country music drifted low through old speakers. Sunlight warmed the window glass. Lily returned carrying a napkin she had drawn on with crayons from the waitress station. She placed it proudly in front of Charlotte. 3 stick figures again. Bigger this time. Beneath them, she had written in careful letters, "Everyone deserves a seat at the table." Charlotte stared at the words. Ethan looked away first. And somewhere between pancakes, sunlight, and a child who still believed in second chances, something invisible sat down beside them. Monday returned with gray skies and the quiet promise of rain. Ethan Walker arrived early as usual, lunch cooler in one hand, blueprint folder in the other. The lobby lights had not fully brightened yet. Hayes Urban Development felt half asleep, all glass and echoes. He nodded to security, took the service elevator, and started another day built from small responsibilities. At 9:17 his phone vibrated. An email notification. Subject line, Regional Infrastructure Coordinator position. Denver, Colorado. Ethan stopped walking. Weeks earlier, during one difficult night after bills and silence and too many memories, he had submitted applications without telling anyone. A backup plan. A door in case life refused to move forward. He opened the message slowly. "We are pleased to offer you the position." His chest tightened. Better salary. Housing assistance. Fresh start. Everything practical said yes. Everything human stayed quiet. Upstairs, Charlotte Hayes stood beside the boardroom window preparing for the afternoon meeting. Her assistant entered holding a folder. Human Resources sent transfer documents for Mr. Walker. Charlotte turned immediately. Transfer? No. Resignation review. Looks like he accepted an offer out of state. The room lost sound. Not literally. People still moved. Printers still worked. Coffee still poured. But inside her something stepped backward. When? She asked softly. He has not submitted notice yet. Only paperwork. The assistant left. Charlotte remained still. Rain finally began outside, tapping against the glass like fingers asking to be let in. Downstairs, Ethan sat alone in the break room, staring at the email. Lily's school picture rested inside his wallet. Missing front tooth. Crooked smile. Hope shaped like a child. Daddy. The word echoed in his memory. People can break promises? He closed his eyes. Denver meant more money. Stability. Maybe even easier mornings. But it also meant leaving the city where Lily had started smiling again. Leaving the office where a woman with tired eyes had laughed inside a diner because a child called her Miss Sunshine. The door opened softly. Charlotte entered. No coffee today. No files. Just quiet. Ethan stood immediately. Miss Hayes. She noticed the open email on the table before he could turn the screen away. Denver. Regional Coordinator. Start date in 3 weeks. The words felt sharper than they should have. You are leaving. It was not a question. Ethan looked down. I had not decided. Rain thickened outside. The room felt smaller somehow. Why? She asked. He gave the answer he had rehearsed. Better opportunity. Better future for Lily. Charlotte nodded once. Graceful. Controlled. Exactly like the woman the world expected. Of course. She turned toward the door. Stopped. Did not look back. Lily drew another picture yesterday. Ethan lifted his eyes. What? Her voice became very quiet. 3 people again. Silence stretched between them. Coffee cooled, untouched on the counter. Rain blurred the city into soft gray lines. What did it say? Ethan asked. Charlotte finally turned. Her eyes held something fragile now. Something she had protected for years. It said families can move, she whispered. But hearts do not always catch up. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The break room lights hummed softly overhead. Ethan looked at the email again. Then at her. For the first time since the divorce, choosing the safe road no longer felt simple. And somewhere inside him a man who had survived loss realized that leaving might hurt more than staying. Rain covered the city by evening. Not a storm. Just the kind of steady rain that made streetlights glow softer and memories feel closer. Ethan Walker sat alone inside the parking garage beneath Hayes Urban Development. His truck engine was off. The offer letter from Denver rested on the passenger seat beside Lily's newest drawing. 3 figures again. Beneath them, she had written, with careful second-grade handwriting, "Home is where people stay." Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. He had spent months teaching himself not to need anything except stability. Food on the table, school lunches, bedtime stories, safe routines, small dreams. It had worked. Until a woman with tired eyes and quiet grace stepped into the empty spaces he had locked away. Footsteps echoed through the garage. Slow, certain. Ethan opened his eyes. Charlotte Hayes stood beneath the concrete lights, rain still shining on her coat sleeves. She had come without an umbrella, without an assistant, without the armor the world expected her to wear. Ethan stepped out immediately. "Miss Hayes." She shook her head once. "Charlotte." Silence followed, the kind that carried years inside it. Rain whispered beyond the garage entrance. Somewhere above them the city moved on, unaware that 2 people stood at the edge of changing everything. Charlotte held something in her hands. Lily's drawing from the diner. "Everyone deserves a seat at the table." She looked down at it before speaking. "I spent years building offices." Her voice was soft. "Buildings, projects, plans." She swallowed. "I thought success would make the silence smaller." Ethan said nothing. She continued. It did not. 3 quick breaths. 2 quiet seconds. 1 truth waiting. Charlotte lifted her eyes. "Then your daughter walked into my office and called me Miss Sunshine." A faint smile appeared. It disappeared just as quickly. "And you walked through hallways carrying lunch boxes and fixing problems nobody saw." Ethan lowered his gaze. "Charlotte, please let me finish." The words trembled. Not with fear. With honesty. Rain tapped against the concrete outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "You lost a marriage," she whispered. "I lost faith." Ethan stood completely still. "You learned how to survive." Her eyes shone now, though she never looked away. "I learned how to hide." She stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to stop running. Lily should not lose another place that feels like home. Ethan's breath caught. Charlotte looked down once more at the drawing. Then back at him. The world became very quiet. "Be my husband." The words were barely louder than rain. No grand speech. No audience. No dramatic music. Just truth standing under garage lights. Ethan froze. Completely. The offer letter slipped from his hand and landed softly beside his boots. Charlotte looked terrified now, as if she had placed her whole heart into the open with nowhere left to retreat. Seconds passed. Maybe more. Then another sound entered the silence. Small footsteps. Ethan turned. Lily stood near the garage entrance wrapped in his brown jacket, holding the emergency dinosaur sticker she always carried. She looked at both adults, then smiled like children do when they recognize hope before anyone else. "Daddy," she said gently. Ethan looked at her. "Yes, sweetheart." Lily held up the sticker. "I think tomorrow came." No one moved. Rain softened. The city lights blurred into gold beyond the garage opening. Ethan looked at Charlotte again. She was still waiting. Still brave. Still standing there with all her quiet dignity. Exposed. And for the first time since the day his world broke apart, he was not looking at loss. He was looking at a second chance.